all of you and Kyle Klingman and the Dan Gable Museum and everybody else. We're really touched by, how nice everybody's been and the honor you're paying to my late brother Owen. And I hope this might put things into perspective for WWE, who I have long since felt make themselves almost look bad by not having an inducted Owen who paid the ultimate price to the WWE. So hopefully this might make an impression on Vince McMahon or Hunter that Owen should be in the WWE Hall of Fame. He's considerably more worthy than some of the people I've seen him inducting in the last few years. So.
And yeah, that's something I know comes up every year with people, is like, when is Owen going to be inducted to the WWE Hall of Fame?
Yeah, I think it would be, as Paul Levesque or Hunter likes to say, what's best for business. And I certainly go on record as saying I know my brother Brett's of the same opinion, that we would be more than in favor of Owen being inducted, and I think it would bring some closure to and make everything kind of help heal. So hopefully WWE will see fit to give consideration to what I'm advocating.
Yep, and regardless of circumstances, on the resume alone, he's very worthy of the WWE Hall of Fame, especially in comparison to many that are in the WWE Hall of Fame.
Oh yeah, I don't like to be disparaging to the Godfather and Medusa, whose main claim to fame was dumping WWE's belt in the garbage on WCW TV and things like that. But I also think, not to digress, but I think my brother-in-law, Davey Boy and Dynamite Kid, one of the preeminent tag teams in the history of the WWE. They're conspicuous by their absence as well. It's like, how come Coco Beware or some of these guys are in the WWE Hall of Fame, and where's Davey Boy, who was tag champion and the Intercontinental champion and one of the biggest crowds in WWE history with my brother Brett at Wembley. So I'd put them all in together, like the Hart Foundation and Owen and Jim and Brett and one more time and the Bulldogs. But
well, and I know the museum here is thrilled to induct Owen into their Hall of Fame. And the great thing about this museum too is it's not just based on your professional background, it's based on your amateur ability too. I know Owen was a heck of an amateur wrestler.
Oh yeah, I'd like to see it. I like to be disparaging or criticizing WWE, but all too often they seem to have forgotten wrestling's roots, that it's based in legit wrestling, and that's what this is all about. I see all these pictures, and I knew a lot of those guys, and I'd hear my dad talking about them, and a lot of them had outstanding amateur backgrounds, and that transcended into the wrestlers that they were, and there was a lot more wrestling, so to speak, than some of the smoke and mirrors and the gimmicks. That's one reason why they have to do all the gimmickry, because unfortunately they don't have that many guys that can wrestle. The bottom line. That's why they have to engage in a lot of the non-wrestling stuff and the talk and for want of a better term, tits and ass and all this other stuff. So I think if they put more focus on wrestling, as this place is about, I think it would be, to quote Paul Levesque, what's best for business. But it takes longer to turn out a wrestler who actually can wrestle than some guy who dyes his hair and talks some trash and has a gimmick, but it comes out in the wash. Though those guys are not capable of having the kind of matches that my brother Brett or Owen and so many of those other guys had back in the day. But there's no shortcuts to any place worth going to, as my dad used to say. So hopefully WWE will work more interactively with places like the Dan Gable and the amateur wrestling federations, and put more emphasis on wrestling and cut back on the BS. Excuse my French sometimes. Talking wrestling, locker room jargon, I'll try to refrain from any F-bombs.
Yeah, you're fine. You're
like
Canadian, so you know more French than many of us in this room. So. I see my family members. Harry Smith, Davey Boy Smith Jr. coming in. Owen Hart. Oh, Ross is stuck in there.
Brother Keith, my lovely sister Diana.
Oh, Keith too, great.
And my nephew, David Hart Smith, better known as Harry to us.
With the most incredible booths. I'm going to have to talk to you later about those. So we have all the Harts that we're planning to have on our panel here now. Bruce got us started off, did a great job there. Thank you, Bruce.
Oh, thank you. If you guys have any questions.
Absolutely, yeah. If you guys have any questions, I will definitely come out and bring the microphone out to you. Great setup this year. We have multiple microphones, and it was a matter of time. So.
Yeah, we're more than willing to discourse on whatever. And,
I was
you guys being here and showing us your support and love.
Bruce, I've always wondered, so they, and it even been featured on television at times. The dungeon, which is essentially, it was in the basement of the house, right?
Yeah, it was just. My dad used, as far back as early 1950s, he was a big proponent of amateur wrestling, as you guys know, and he used to get a lot of these wannabes, as he called them, a lot of football players, amateur wrestlers, weightlifters and stuff, and he would take them down in the dungeon, and I think he'd just test their mettle or see whether they had any of the characteristics that a wrestler needs, and sometimes that incorporated him, as he used to refer to them as stretching them. And my dad would have a few other guys, some of whom I've seen on the Hall of Fame plaques over there, like George Gordienko and Luther Lindsay, and some of those people. And these guys would have to kind of go through this quasi-dues paying process where they were subjected to a little bit of TLC, whatever you want to call it. And in a lot of cases, they would kind of never return.
Yeah.
But the guys that endured that and paid their dues, so to speak, they were brought into the so-called fraternity, and so many of them went on to become incredible wrestlers and great ambassadors for the sport. And I think that's something that to some degree has been lost or compromised. I don't like to be constantly denouncing WWE, but back in the day there was similar places to my dad's dungeon. Like if you were down in Oklahoma, you maybe had to go through some of those guys down there with Danny Hodge types, and if you were down in Amarillo, Dory Funk Sr. would put you through your paces, or Eddie Graham had Hiro Matsuda and Carl Gotch and some of them.
Mike LaBelle in California.
Yep.
Gene LaBelle, and I know when I was in England, when I ran into Dynamite and Davey, I went to the Wigan Gym, and this is where Billy Robinson came out of, and the same thing, same kind of thing. And they were instilling character, and they were turning out guys that the fans could look up to and admire and believe in. And that's sort of been a little bit lost in the shuffle. And I think WWE needs to go back to square one a bit, in my estimation, and restore more semblance of quasi-legitimacy. If you don't respect yourself, how do you expect anyone to respect you, as my dad used to say? So, hopefully that'll be happening.
This is kind of a question for everyone up here. Is so with having really this tremendous wrestling room in your home. I mean, when you guys would come home from school, would you regularly just go down and start wrestling around on the mats down in the basement? Yeah.
Quite often we were. I remember my dad would be conducting these stretching sessions, and if you got too close to the mat, my dad would drag you out on the mat. Next thing, you'd have your arms up, you'd be demonstrating. So most of us were savvy enough that we would kind of stay away, not get too close, and encourage my dad, how does the thread through go, or something, to one of these football players.
Did Helen ever say, hey, Stu, go easy on the kids a little bit?
I remember more than a few times my mother, who was sort of the antithesis of what my dad was like, you'd hear these blood-curdling shrieks and screaming and all this stuff, and once in a while my mother would get a little bit bent out of shape and holler down the stairs, Stu, or something, and if he didn't respond, I remember more than a few times she'd like throw a big bowl or a glass or something, crash, and then Stu would say, hey, I think Tiger Bill's calling me. But yeah, it was interesting. It was the epitome of old school, and I think most of you guys know my dad's original coach was this old guy named Jack Taylor, who was way back. He was Frank Gotch's chief running mate around the turn of the 19th century, and they were the two. My dad used to describe them as the two prize pupils of Farmer Burns, Frank Gotch and Jack Taylor. And Taylor was kind of the main guy who taught my dad and imparted most of the elements of shooting. And I think my dad had great pride, because his roots first, he went back to Farmer Burns, who was almost kind of the the guy who pretty much launched the business back in the Frank Gotch, Freddie Beal, George Hackenschmidt days. So, my dad was very proud of the fact that his roots transcended that far back. And I think one of the old, not to digress, but there was some old guy that Jack Taylor and Frank Gotch used to stretch, and they took him along on the road trips, a guy named Toots Montt. And he went on to become the kingpin, or the main thing in the pre-WWE New York. And he was kind of the one of the main figures in the formative years of the whole business. So we're all pretty proud of the fact that my dad was kind of interactive in almost the formative stages of the business. And we were kind of lucky when we were kids to have a steady stream of legends that you met, and I didn't even realize how legendary some of them were till I was older. But you'd see Lou Thez up there on a regular basis, or you'd see Gino Morella, or George Gordienko, or Luther Lindsay, or
Leo Nomalini,
once in a while, Vern Gagne, or Earl McCready, or some of these guys that are kind of iconic within the the business. You hear the boys talking about them, and I was fortunate enough to meet so many of them. I was see them informally up at the house, and they all had the same mindset that I'm alluding to, you know, as far as respecting the business and protecting the ostensible propriety of the business and things like that, which all too often have been compromised or, you know, forgotten, you know, in recent years, which is, you know, unfortunate.
The great thing about this weekend is we have these unique panels and unique guests, and it's great to have Harry Smith here, who, if you follow New Japan Pro Wrestling or some of his exploits when he was in Pro Wrestling Noah, part of a tremendous Team Killer Elite squad. Big fan of yours, if I can just mark out for a moment.
Thanks for having all of us today.
Yeah. And I guess for me, what I was wondering is, and the great thing about having a discussion like this, you can ask more unique questions, is so, Owen spent some time in New Japan himself, had some tremendous bouts, and when you started going over there, were people, or the people in the staff, or even the fans say, hey, we remember not just your dad, but we remember Owen Hart, and you remind us of him, and things like that?
Yes, certainly. I think that it should also be noted that I think that over the years things have changed, but for quite a while, I think Owen was the only foreign gaijin to have ever won the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship at a time when it was quite a rarity. And you know, he had a lot of tremendous matches over there with guys like Koshi Naka and Jushin Thunder Liger, Hiroase, and you know, going back and watching all of his footage is really awesome. And you know, I could definitely see that he had a lot of the Japanese influence in his training as well from Mr. Hito Adachi-san. So if anybody in here hasn't seen any of Owen's New Japan stuff, they should go onto YouTube and see it. He was a really, really tremendous wrestler, and what an athlete.
Yeah, oh yeah, just tremendous stuff. Just absolutely tremendous. And you know, he was a guy that he
was like effortlessly smooth, I guess you could
yes,
say.
absolutely. And like even with like, I saw a clip recently, and it was one of his first years in WWF. He wrestled Barry Horowitz, who generally was used as an enhancement talent, but they let him go. And they had a tremendous, like, 15-minute match, and I think that's online too, if you get a chance to check that out too. So now, Diana, would you get down there and wrestle on the mats with all your brothers too?
Yeah, I did. It was usually under the table or something, we were arguing over who got to take the cats to bed. Yeah, I learned actually a lot of leg wrestling and stuff from Owen and Ross. Headlocking, and there weren't a lot of options for me who to play with, so Owen and Ross. And I actually was a pretty good little scrapper, but I learned a lot from, in particular, my older brother Ross, who's number 10, and I'm number 11, and Owen was number 12. So. Yeah, it was really fun. You know, I did a lot of foot wrestling. I had good feet for it, and yeah, it was more wrestling than like playing board games or. Good question.
Down in the dungeon, there was never any ropes. There's so very little. Down in the dungeon, there was never any ropes or anything. In its own way, it made you focus more on amateur-based wrestling and chain wrestling and that kind of thing. And I think that, in its own way, was beneficial to the type of wrestlers that were coming out of there. A lot of the ones you guys are familiar with, like Dynamite and Davey and Benoit and Owen and Liger and Hussey and some of them. It was very amateur-based, but in its own way, it turned out to be a better brand of wrestling. we spent very little time down there, you know, doing high spots and that kind of stuff. And
The ceiling probably wasn't very high.
yeah, and I think, not to be critical, but I think there's way too damn many high spots right now, like at Am Circus or at Stunfest, and it's kind of bastardized whatever wrestling should be, and I think they almost need to, NXT or whatever, cut back on about 90% of the high spots and whatever, and do more wrestling. The wrestling sets up the high spots. It's like the run sets up the pass in football. If all you're doing is high spots, then you may as well go to the damn circus or something like that. My dad was of that opinion, and you talk about all the great wrestlers that are on the wall down there. I don't think too many of them ever climbed up to the top rope or did a swan dive or you know, a triple holy shit type spot. And I think some of the guys today maybe need to be more cognizant of that, and you know, trying to do more wrestling. And if they're doing that, then the high spots will actually mean something. But if all they're doing is high spots, then you know, you may join the circus or be a break dancer or whatever the hell.
You know, and it's ironic, and obviously the amateur credentials of their family are noted, but it's even saying that, and this speaks to the talent of Owen, he was highly regarded one of the better high flyers of really all time. So smooth and crisp.
Well, and that's what made him so good, is he was, he used the wrestling, the run set up, the pass, he did the wrestling so artfully that if and when he did a high spot, it meant something. And Dynamite Kid was the same, and Davey Boy, they were capable of doing the high spots as good as anyone, but they did the wrestling to set it up, and that's what made them good, you know. I feel sorry for a lot of these poor bastards today, many of whom are wearing masks and are 3 feet tall and stuff like that, but that's all they do is damn high spots and combinations and all that crap. And I think so.
Midgets have always been popular through the years.
Yeah. Unfortunately, not perceived to be midgets, even though they might be, you know. So I don't know, but anyway, I'm not trying to disparage. I think they need to go back to some semblance of conventionality. And I think if they did, the fans would be, you know, happy and embrace that again, you know. But it takes longer to turn out a good worker than, you know, you spend more time in the gym, and that's one of the other problems with the business these days. Back in the days of the territories, there was these opportunities to refine your skills and all like that. And nowadays they hit to WWE and they're afraid to do anything, you know, so they do all these choreographed high spot fests, and it comes out in the wash, unfortunately.
Well, we have about 20 minutes left, so if it's all right with you guys, I'm just going to say if any of the folks in the crowd have specific questions, I'd love to come out and bring the microphone to you.
Yeah, I'd love to get perspective from you. This is for you and about you, so if you guys have any inquiries or seek perspective on anything, it'd be, any of us would be happy.
All right, we got a go-getter waiting in the back here.
Let us know which one of the Hart Mafia you want to answer.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah. You don't have to just talk to Bruce if you don't want to. So.
Let's say Keith or Moss or Harry or Diana.
My question is kind of for everybody. What was it like having the wrestling bear living in your house?
Keith, answer that.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We just thought it was normal, though. Wouldn't every normal family of 12 whose father was a wrestling promoter, would they just naturally have a wrestling bear? We just thought that was the what everybody had. So he was just a pet. We had all kinds of pets. We had our own cow and goats, and my dad was very much into was organic food. He had our own garden and goats and everything. And of course, we never slaughtered any animals. They're very much animal lovers. But we had all kinds of animals, dogs and chickens, and why not a bear? He was pretty game.
I think a lot of the neighbors used to wonder we were like a cross between the Addams Family and the Beverly Hillbillies.
I don't know if you
Often
ever...
than not, my dad would have guys like Sweet Daddy Siki, a black guy with blonde hair, or midgets, or bald-headed lady wrestlers, and Haystacks Calhoun. I think we had a wrestling bear up there hibernating for a few months, and neighbors are always wondering, about that weird family with, the goats and the chickens and the bald-headed dwarfs and all this stuff like that.
It was a lot of fun. I can't even begin to estimate what great life it was growing up there. We had 30 acres, and the house itself was not just a house, but it was about a 40-room Victorian mansion with great big basements. They talk about the dungeon. The dungeon was about the size of this room, and it was I had mats on one wall and weights, and it was, for the longest time, it's the only weight room in Calgary, outside of the University of Calgary. And my dad brought up guys, police, firemen, Stampeders football players. He made wrestlers out of some of the guys like Billy Graham Superstar, John Helton, Gene Kiniski, and Leo Nomalini. But when he down in the dungeon, it wasn't just where he grabbed guys and some little guy and squashed the living shit out of them. But he actually took guys like Luther Lindsay and Bill Perzak and Jack Pesic, John Pesic's kid. And they'd wrestle. They'd go at it and they'd wrestle each other. And guys came into the territory because they were tough. And that's what we grew up with. So when Owen was growing up with this in the background, he had a basic understanding of mat wrestling first. But then I want to emphasize that Owen went to university. He was a very, very bright kid, and he's doing kinesiology at the University of Calgary. He's on the Calgary Wrestling Club. He wrestled for Calgary, and I know they toured to Hawaii. They went all across Canada. He went to national championships. And Owen was a very good mat wrestler and freestyle wrestler. And he just started wrestling to pay for his tuition in the summertime. And he was just such a good wrestler that he found a niche there. He was just so natural. And he watched these guys who were just ahead of him, like Dynamite Kid, Davey Boy, doing their high flying that they brought with them from England. And so everything was natural. So he was, if you talk about somebody who can speak 5 different languages and he's a linguistic artist, Owen was a wrestling genius, and he did everything. As far as I'm concerned, Owen did everything that Brett could do, but to a higher degree. And I'd by far rather watch Owen's wrestling videos than Brett's, because he could wrestle any style. He could put on a mask. He could do. I know they tried to box him into corners, making him be putting him with Coco Beware, putting him, making him do that stupid gimmick, the Blue Blazer, and anything. Just, I was like, let's put Owen in an awkward position. He was like a kind of a misfit the way they treated him, and he'd turn it around and turn it into the best angle of the bunch. He'd take it and fly with it. He went to the stupid awards, made a big deal about it so that the award actually meant something. And he was very adaptable, because he could do anything. He could wrestle anybody, and whoever he wrestled had the best match ever. It's like, man, I didn't know that Tom McGee or so-and-so was such a good match, because Owen was so versatile, and he had such an active mind, and he could think about 3 different levels while you're just plodding along with one. Question? Yeah.
When we had the opportunity to be around Owen and quite a few of the wrestlers in Denver, we found that he was quite the jokester, and I think everybody knows that. Could I ask, in your family as you were growing up, what kind of fun jokester things did he pull on your family members and maybe others in the neighborhood or the other wrestlers?
Owen was one of the few guys that seemed to be able to get away with pulling my dad's tail. I don't think any of us, when we were growing up, would have ever dared to. Owen always seemed to be have a knack for. I remember even a few years back, my dad was getting on a bit, but he was at one of these WrestleMania episodes down in Los Angeles, I think, and there was this old veteran who had broken in Calgary back in the day named Reggie Parks, and anyway, Owen called Reggie, he called my dad up on the phone and was impersonating Reggie Parks, and he's kind of half stammering about back in 1955 or something, you had me down in the dungeon, Stu, and he's kind of stammering, and Stu's saying, yeah, I remember that, Reggie. He wasn't quite sure what Owen was getting at, and or what Reg was getting at, and so Owen said, and he was half stammering and all, you took advantage of me, Stu, and all like that, and Stu was, yeah, what are you getting at, Reggie? And anyway, a while later, my dad was pretty wound up, and they're down on the convention floor about an hour later, and Reggie Parks, who hadn't seen my dad in about 30 years, comes up to shake hands, and my dad was, if you want to try me, Reg, go for it. And Reggie wasn't sure what Stu was so wound up, or like Stu was already, let's do it right here, Reg, if you think you can take me.
Speaking of Reggie Parks, a lot of the championship belts you see today are actually made by Reggie Parks, so that's kind of an installing card with that. So
Owen was a real master impersonator, though. He used to impersonate sometimes my dad or Vince McMahon or another wrestler promoter, or just an annoying insurance salesman or telemarketer, and he would phone my dad, and my dad would always be in a rush to get to the show or get the wrestlers on their way, and then you'd hear this voice on the phone, and there would be a whole conversation, and my dad would just get very frustrated because the conversation wasn't going anywhere, and he had no idea that it was Owen, just impersonating someone completely different. And usually at the end of the conversation, Owen would burst out laughing, and my dad would say, "Oh, you bastard." And slam the phone down and say, "He got me again." So.
I know Owen did a rib with, back in the day, there was these two guys, Henry O. Godwin and Phineas Cy Godwin or something, but I guess they were doing a raw taping, and they had brought in a bunch of pigs and a cow and a goat and some chickens and whatever, and the guy showed up at the arena a bit early with all this livestock and asked where he should put it. And Owen took him right to Vince McMahon's personal dressing room, and he had all the stuff. So Vince arrived about an hour later, and there's pigs and goats, and I heard like cow shit on the floor and all this other. And initially Vince was, I heard a bit bent out of shape, and then somehow there you heard that Owen had orchestrated this, and I heard he was half laughing and saying that Owen got me again or something like that. But it was kind of funny.
Question?
Sir. Well, first, as I told Bruce last night, sorry again to everyone again. Poor Owen. I lived in Missouri at the time, in Kansas City, and I was going to go to that pay-per-view. For whatever reason, I couldn't make it. And I'm glad now, of course I didn't. But us as fans, missing terribly, I'm sure, way more. You guys, way more than being fans. But again, we're sorry too. And Davey Boy, I want to let you know, man, your entrance last night, oh, that pumped me up. You come out to your dad's music, man, that I was curious. I don't think, was you wearing his ring attire, or was that something custom made or whatever you had?
No, it was, no, actually, it was custom made for me, but just in case you're curious, I'm actually getting some new stuff made from Mexico from a guy that makes Rey Mysterio stuff. Oh, sweet. And I'm looking forward to that. But
I have something to add to that about Davey's gear and Harry. When Harry was 9 years old, he had his very first match at the Rockyford Rodeo, and he wore Davey's gear. It was his tights, but he had them cinched up, and yeah, he did wear them. It was quite cute, and he had a great match.
good job, Davey. Thank you.
If any of you guys have any questions, just put your hand up and he'll bring the mic over to you. I appreciate all your input. Some great interaction here.
Hi, Gabe.
Hi, how are you? Hey, thank you all for coming. I heard 20-plus hour drive for some of you flow in to be here, so thank you so much. For me, I just want to say, big fan, obviously, of your whole family. But Ari, if I can ask you, I was talking to Bruce the other night about where Owen was at in his career and maybe the powers that be in the WWE. Then not seeing him get out of that box and being a world champion. You're out doing MLW and New Japan, doing stuff outside WWE, making a name, a brand, and we're all fans here of you, obviously. We want to see you be a world champion. Thank you. Where are your personal goals currently, and maybe going down the road of maybe where you see your career going, if you don't mind sharing that? Thank you again.
Yeah, certainly, no problem. Touching base on what you were just mentioning about Owen, after we were done eating and everything, we went back to the hotel, and I watched his promo that he did when he came back as the Blackheart, and he had the goatee, and he had the black cutoff sleeve shirt, and the black jeans, and the white cowboy boots, and he did that promo with Vince in the ring, and he grabbed Vince by the collar and kind of roughed him up, and I thought it was a really, really good, intense, real promo. And I don't know why WWE didn't run more with Owen as a character as far as that went. Because I think that it had a lot of good heat, and he was the only one that stayed when everybody else left. And I think that, young aspiring wrestlers, they could watch something like that and learn from it that, promos, they have to be real, you know what I mean? And you have to have something that you need to talk about. And anybody that wants to say that Owen couldn't cut a promo or anything like that, I think is unfair or not a right thing to say, because a lot of times he wasn't given that opportunity, but it was what he was talking about, you know what I mean? And when he was given a certain subject or a certain substance to talk about, or a situation like with Vince McMahon, and he got up in his face, and it was real, you know what I mean? And I remember when Bad News Brown, he went and yanked Jack Tunney before on the Brother Love show, and it was real, people need to learn from watching promos and stuff like that, and that I think that Owen he was really good with his, outside the ring, being with the comedy stuff, but he also could show that he could be real and he could be intense, and I think that everybody should learn something from that. But as far as my current goals, the World of Sport Wrestling just debuted. I'm actually getting a billion tweets and messages about that. I had a really good match with Will Ospreay and in England. So I would like to continue with that for now, and I have aspirations of becoming the world heavyweight champion there. And that was where my father first started in Dynamite Kid, and one of my senseis, Tiger Mess, Satoru Sayama, he started over there. And I think that World of Sports really, it's going to grow and keep growing and be great. And I love Japan. You know, I love the Japanese culture, and I love my growth there and learning the language, and I love the food, and being able to learn from guys like Tiger Mask and Minoru Suzuki and Akira Maeda and Yoshiaki Fujiwara. I'm really lucky because nobody else really has that opportunity to learn from those kind of guys. And those guys, like Bruce was just mentioning, it's not all about the how hard you can slap your leg when you hit somebody, or doing a bunch of goofy, silly, sloppy, soft high spots. And it's about going out there and showing real good wrestling. And I think that everybody nowadays is missing the basics. And I think that Owen really, he had the basics down, and that was from training in the dungeon. And that's not a knock on anybody, it's just that there's not enough good teachers around, and there's not enough territories around. That's just the way it is. So hopefully that answers your question.
All right, we have a couple more minutes, so we can take probably 2 more questions, I would say. So does anyone else have a, well, here we go.
I'm Kyle from Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Hello, Kyle from Green Bay.
It's been a pleasure hanging out with the Harts this weekend. You know, what is the most memorable moment of your life of, you know, all the WrestleManias and Royal Rumbles and Survivor Series? What was the most funnest from you guys?
I gotta say, strictly pro wrestling, the proudest thing I ever saw, the proudest moment was when, it's not to do with Owen, but when Brett and Davey Boy wrestled at Wembley, when they brought that flag in, and Diana was there, and I watched that. I was working as a firefighter in Calgary at that time. I had a full career there, a professional firefighter. We all watched that, and you know, it was a cheer that went up around the world, at least from England to Canada, and it was electric. Yeah, I had being with a bunch of firemen watching it. They weren't all what you say, super fans, but they watched that match, and everybody in that room was convinced, and it was like if we were watching the World Cup. And when the match ended, it was such a spectacular match that they almost carried me around the fire hall. It was just spectacular. I was never so proud of pro wrestling, of being a pro wrestler, of being connected to Brett, Davey Boy, my sister, and the whole family. And I thought it all emanated from not just from Calgary Dungeon, but from a deep-rooted love of professional wrestling at its very finest. I thought that was, to me, the greatest match I ever saw.
Thank you. I love you guys.
I was just going to add to that. Probably my favorite Owen memory was the Canadian Stampede event in Calgary. Which the atmosphere there was just unbelievable. But there was an angle where Owen had hurt his knee, and then he came back later on, and I think he caught Steve Austin with the roll up at the very end, and the pop from that was just amazing. So that was my favorite Owen Hart memory, as far as him in the ring.
One of my favorite, it wasn't in the ring, but it was after the induction of my dad at the WWE Hall of Fame in 2010, and then they did the show the next day, and then we'd been trying to get a picture all weekend of everybody, and it was just hard to get all of us together. And then you know, it's just, so we're all together, but we're about to go on stage for the speech, or we're about to do this or that. But they finally got us all together in at the hotel on the second floor, and John Laurinaitis was the one who took this picture, and we're all together. And I think it's the first time we've been together like that since before there were any, anybody had passed away, or and we were missing a lot of people, but it was just when I have the picture now, WWE framed a really nice, huge of all of us, and I see everyone that was in the picture I see everyone's faces, and everyone is smiling, and I wish I could freeze that and just go back into that picture, because it was just such a nice, after everything was kind of like, we were all together, everything, you can't undo the past, but
With a wrestling context.
And a wrestling context, it wasn't like we were at another funeral or something. But when I look at that picture, everyone is smiling, and I just wish I could go back into that sometimes and freeze time where you have that moment. I've had great moments, but like my son and my daughter in that picture, all of us. But I mean, Davey wasn't in it, or my mom and dad, but I'm just saying it was such a great thing. I wish I could just crawl back in there sometimes.
All right, it is, we're gonna have to call it there unless one of you has something else you want to say here. Because coming up, we are gonna have a Bruiser Brody discussion too as well, so.
Brian Blair, you had a question?
I wanted to tell you guys a story you might not know about Owen. I don't know if you guys know this story or not, but when Owen first came into WWF, Brett and I were very close. Actually, he's one of my favorite opponents of all time. Him and Mr. Wonderful, I would say. Paul Wonderful were my two favorite guys to work with, ever. And Brett says to me, Brian, there's all the stuff that goes on here, and would you mind spending at least a couple of weeks with Owen and make sure he understands everything and kind of teach him the ropes? And I said, sure, I'd love to. So Owen and I meet. Very wonderful young man. He seemed like American apple pie. I know he's Canadian, but just apple pie and Chevrolet, as we say. And we get the booking sheets, and back then you could have run 5 towns if you had enough talent and resources. But since we were running 2 and 3 towns a night, Brett and I were usually separated, so Brett couldn't be with Owen. That's why he wanted me to be with Owen. So we get the booking sheet. I'll make this kind of shorten it up a little bit. Owen and I are in the car together. We were staying in the hotels together, splitting rooms, teaching he already knew most of the stuff, but saving here, Miami, and all that. Trying to give him the dad, big brother kind of speech, and all of a sudden he said, Brian, we're going to Chico, California. And I said, okay. He said, no, Chico State. I said, okay. He said, Chico State was rated #1 party. Chico State University was rated the #1 party place in the United States of America. And I said, okay, that sounds pretty interesting. I'm listening to it. And he said, Dad, they get this place called Madison Bear Garden, and I've always wanted to go there. And I said, okay. He said, yeah, it's right on campus. So now he's telling me all this stuff. I'm saying, well, this is a little innocent Owen wants to do it. So we go to Madison Bear Garden, our beer garden, Madison Beer Garden, and on Chico State University, and you have to buy beer bucks. And I still have several of them left over. But if you would have saw your brother had like these mats, you go and sit on these mats, and there was like a lot of girls there. And Owen wasn't the most innocent guy in the world. And he just really surprised me, and we spent a lot of beer bucks and had a great time, but I'll leave it like that. But I just want to say that it was such an honor and a privilege to just be with Owen for like a month straight, town after town after town, and just kind of watch him blossom from there, and know that he had that spunk in him, but he had that intelligence and that innocence, and he could be anything that he wanted to be already at that young age. And the Madison Bear Garden experience is something I will never forget in my life.
Thank you, Brian, for sharing that, and thank you all for joining us up here today, and thank you all for attending. Great fun discussion.